What's up, YouTube? My name is Caden and you're watching Gas at Garage. Today, we're going to be doing part 5 of the 670 Yerf Dog go-kart project. Alright, so in the last video of this project, we got everything finalized on this thing and I was able to take it for its first official test drive. And overall, it was a pretty successful test drive on this thing. The suspension works out super well, even though it is a little bit stiff. It absorbs all the bumps like butter. And then after that, about a month ago now, I was able to take this thing up to Busco Beach ATV Park for mini mayhem with cars and cameras. And man, this thing was an absolute beast. It was so capable. And it just plowed through basically anything I threw at it. There was a couple of super technical mud holes that I went through that I thought I was going to get stuck in, and this thing just drove right through them with ease. So the only thing that did go wrong was my brake caliper mount got busted because I wasn't able to get a solid weld on it just because of kind of where it is in the frame. It's just hard to get a welder in there. And then the other thing that broke was these steering tabs. They got severely bent, I guess probably just because of the big bumps at Mini Mayhem, and this thing just wasn't able to handle it and they got pretty badly bent. And also the wheel bearings in that wheel are pretty much destroyed, so there's a lot of play in that thing. And then also this tire is flat, so my steering got all messed up and I just wasn't able to drive it a whole lot after the fact. So in this video I'm going to be fixing the brake caliper, and I'm also going to start dismantling this whole front end because I'm actually going to completely rebuild the front suspension on this go-kart. I'm going to build wider A-arms, so this thing has a little bit more suspension travel, and then I'm also going to attempt to make my own custom spindles for this thing, which should be interesting considering I don't have a lathe or a mill or anything like that. I don't even have a drill press. So it's going to be interesting to see how that all works out, but I'm going to start this video off by actually just inflating the tires and taking this thing for a little rip, because in the last video I didn't really get to drive it around a whole lot like I really wanted to. All right, guys, I'm gonna take this thing out for a drive. I don't have brakes and I also can hardly turn right, so this should be interesting. This is gonna be interesting. May have turned the choke off too quick. And it died again. Yay, okay. scary. All right, I'm gonna go fix this thing before I drive it around anymore because obviously it's a little dangerous. So I'm gonna turn the camera off so I can safely drive this thing back and hopefully not die. Not exactly sure what happened there. Maybe my throttle stuck or something. I don't think so, I don't know. All right, let me get this thing out of here and I will see you back. All right, well, that was certainly interesting. My Vimble right here decided to have a nice long look straight up at the sky right when the good part was happening. So you weren't really able to see exactly what took place. So basically what happened was I was coming down the road going a little bit faster than I probably should have. And it was at that moment that I realized I have no brakes. So I had to fly into this turn and cut the wheel all the way to the left to attempt to turn around without hitting anything. So I had to go up into the grass and then cut across the road down into the little gravel turnaround that's at the end of my street. And then since my turning radius isn't the greatest on that thing, I went kind of into the grass and I had to reach down and turn the engine off. But yeah, that was a little sketchy. So it's probably not safe to keep driving this thing around with no brakes and super messed up steering and a tire that keeps going flat, because this thing handles horribly and I don't have full control over it. Because if you look at my steering here, if I cut it all the way to the left, first of all, the tire scrubs the frame right there, and this tire turns way further than it should. And then if I try and turn to the right, that's full lock. That's as far as I can go. And also, these wheel bearings in here are totally shot. There's a ton of play in that thing, and you can see how much the wheel is leaning in. And also, another reason I'm rebuilding the front end of this thing is because the scrub radius, which is the distance between the center of the tire and the pivot point of the spindle, is really, really bad, because you want the scrub radius as small as possible, which will give you better handling. So because this thing has probably a good 5 inches of scrub radius, it handles horribly. Not to mention that spindle is also pretty badly bent. And there's just a ton of play in everything. So everything about this front end is just messed up and sketchy. So I'm gonna completely dismantle this whole thing and rebuild it. I'm gonna build new control arms. I'm gonna build new spindles. I'm gonna replace the wheel bearings, and I'm probably also gonna get new tires and a different location for the steering rack. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started on taking apart this whole front end. Okay, so I have this front end of this go-kart mostly dismantled. Now, these 3 bolts on these remaining A-arms here are seriously fighting me trying to get out. I think they're just a little bit rusty and they've gotten seized like inside of this tube right here. So I'm really having to work on them to try and get them out, and they're not budging. So I'll just finish doing that off camera, but you can really see how bad this was here. I mean, that right there should be at a 90-degree angle, and it is severely bent. And then that was my janky, quick welding job that I did at Mini Mayhem to attempt to fix steering, which didn't really help a whole lot. And honestly, there was also quite a bit of jank going on here. Since these are not the stock tires that came on this go-kart, and the original ones were just little dinky go-kart front tires that were super cheap, and they're practically like lawnmower front tires. So these were put on by someone else, and they didn't do it very professionally because there's just a whole bunch of washers spaced on there, and there's electrical tape wrapped around the spindle right there, which caused a lot of play. And before I took this thing apart, after I had it jacked up in the air, I was wiggling everything around, and there was a ton of play in pretty much all the moving parts except these joints. The ball joints had play in them, the spindles had play in them, the wheel bearings had play, the ball joints on the end of the tie rods had play in them. It was just a janky mess. So I'm gonna finish taking this apart, and then I could start figuring out how I'm going to rebuild this front suspension. And then we can go from there. All right, so I've been kind of staring at this thing for hours now, and I can't really make up my mind on what exactly I want to do with the front of this go-kart. Mainly because I just cannot get these 2 A-arms to come off, because these bolts, they're just spinning inside of the tube right there. And there's actually a sleeve right here that the bolt sits inside of, and what I think has happened is the bolt has actually rusted onto that sleeve and basically fused itself together, and it's just preventing the bolt from coming out. So unless I can get these bolts out, kind of what I'm leaning towards doing is cutting off this whole section right here and leaving this for 2 purposes. Number 1, aesthetics, because it's got the original Yerf dog sticker on there, which I think is kind of cool. And also I like the look of this front plate right here. And then the second reason is also I want to utilize the top shock mounts so I don't have to build more shock mounts on this thing. It's just one less thing I have to do. Now, I was going to reuse the top part of these A-arms right here to mount my new longer A-arms to, because I was going to basically just cut these 2 tubes off here and use this one because it still has the sleeve in it. And then I was going to weld on the new pieces of tubing. But the more I'm looking at this, I actually want the new A-arms to be wider, because the wider the A-arm, the more stability you're going to have. And also the frame of the A-arms themselves will actually be a lot stronger this way. They'll be less likely to break. So one thought I had was to cut both of these off and just weld one tube onto here coming this way, and then weld the second one onto a mount I would make right in there to make it wider. But the more I'm looking at this, it's just going to be really difficult to do that. So I'm thinking I'm just going to cut off this bottom piece right here and build a whole front frame right here and make my own mounts for the A-arms. So I think that's probably what I'm gonna do. All right, time to cut apart something that should never be cut apart. This feels so wrong. So I got this front end all chopped up. I actually had to cut the head off the bolt on, which one was it? I think it was that one, to be able to get it out so I could get the grinder in there to cut it. But this thing is all chopped apart, so there's no going back now. And then I also cut off these tabs off of right here, just to have some tabs, because I don't know what I'll use them for. Maybe like some shock mounts or mounting the steering rack or something. I don't know. It's just good to have some tabs like that lying around to mount things. But this is about all I can do on the front end right now until the parts that I ordered to rebuild the suspension get here. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to come around back and start fixing that. What I want to do is basically bend this back to where this is back onto the brake disc so it works properly, and then I'm actually going to cut this off and re-weld it, and then I'm going to weld a brace onto there so it's a lot stronger. And then after that's fixed, then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to remove this header, and what I want to do is cut it off probably about right there. And I actually found a exhaust pipe end off of probably an old truck or an old car. This thing was just sitting in the woods. So it is a little rusty, so I'll have to clean it up. But I'm planning on taking this and welding it on right there so I can have this piece coming out. Obviously it's not going to be this long, so I'm going to cut it probably somewhere in the middle right there, and I'll make another one of these ends because I just think it looks pretty cool. And this larger diameter pipe will probably make the exhaust sound quite a bit better because it'll kind of resonate inside of it. So I'm going to fix the brakes first, and then I can get started on that new exhaust. Okay, now that I have the brake caliper all put back together and braced with that piece, now I can move on to redoing the end of this header. First, I'm gonna cut off the end of that, and then I'm going to cut this thing to length and clean all the rust off of it and weld it all together. So I got this header all finished up. There was one little tiny spot right about there where I couldn't weld because I ran out of welding wire right when I was about to finish. So I'll weld that later. But I think this pipe looks pretty darn cool. It does have some holes in it from the rust, but I think it just kind of adds to the look. And hopefully this thing is going to sound really good. So I'm going to take off the main drive chain right there and start this thing up real quick to see how that thing sounds. That thing sounds absolutely awesome. That's really cool. All right, so that's gonna have to be it for this video, guys, because I can't really do anything else on the front end of this go-kart until the parts that I ordered get here. So thank you all for watching this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment, and I will see you in part 6.